This is Mind Your Business, and I'm your host, Bob Burnett. I'm the CEO of Barefoot Mining, a Bitcoin mining company, and the former Chief Technology Officer of the PC company Gateway. On Mind Your Business, we explore all topics pertaining to Bitcoin, macroeconomics, geopolitical issues, and pretty much wherever the wind may blow us in our conversations. Today, I'm joined by Sean Harris. Sean's a professional basketball player, but more importantly, he's a Bitcoiner. And he's had the opportunity to travel the world, play basketball all over the world, and he's found himself in the Bitcoin space. He's also a co-host of the Meme Factory, a very popular and fun YouTube show all about Bitcoin. I hope you'll check that out if you haven't seen it already. Let's drop in now on my conversation with Sean. Sean Harris, welcome to Mind Your Business. How are you, sir?
Doing great, man. I'm excited. We've talked a while about coming on, so I'm excited to be here today.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I try to bring guests that come from different perspectives in the Bitcoin world, and I think you have a very unique story. At least I believe you do, and I'm really anxious to kind of dig in. But as we get started, why don't you tell everybody where you're coming to us from today?
Yeah, I am in Madrid, Spain right now. I'm playing basketball out here. So, I've played basketball overseas for a long time. And the last few years I've been in Spain. I've been in Tenerife, and the last 2 years, and then this year, was fortunate enough to get on a team here in Madrid. And I love it. I've played all over the world, and I'm just gonna keep playing till I can't.
Yeah, you should. As a guy that's almost 59, I can say, there's a certain period of when your athletic prowess is is there, and obviously you've reached a very high level, and so use it and enjoy it, and I think that's so cool. And I happen to have several friends that have taken a similar path to you, and I think sometimes probably a lot of people here in the US don't understand how much basketball is played around the world and the level at which it's played
Yeah.
around the world.
Yeah. There's leagues in every country, and I think that's what people don't realize. And it's funny too, when I tell people, yeah, I'm playing in Spain, sometimes they'll say like, oh, well, are you playing for Spain, for the Spanish country? I'm like, no, I'm not a Spanish citizen, but I play on a team in Spain, and so I think there's people know about the NBA, and then after that, there's not much that we know about in the United States.
Yeah. And I think that that's true in South America, it's true in Asia, it's true across all of Europe, and I don't know enough about it to say what the relative status of one league is over the other, but I believe in Spain especially, they play a very high level of ball. Really, throughout Europe, they play a very high level of ball. So I'm sure you have
Yeah.
a great time and are really challenged by that.
Yeah, there's a good level ball out here for sure. And it's probably the highest IQ basketball is in Spain. And so that's what's a lot of fun for me is that's kind of how I like to play. I use my body a lot, but then I also like to be able to pass, make the extra pass and try to play chess on the basketball court. If you can, why not just outthink the opponent, and then you don't have to run as hard sometimes. You still have to run hard no matter what.
Well, I get that, and again, I played basketball myself, just obviously street ball and rec ball and all that, into my 50s. But there's always that old man basketball thing, and as you
Mhm.
become an old man, you realize if you want to still play, you have to play that smart way because you can't out jump anybody or out quick anybody or anything like that. All you have is knowledge of what might happen next, and try to beat somebody there. I've found interestingly though, I found having talked to a lot of Bitcoiners both on this show and even throughout, that an athletic background is not an unusual background. And there are guys like CJ Wilson that played pro baseball,
Yeah.
James Lavish, who was drafted in the NHL. There are people like you. There's a lot of other stories at much lower levels, but still a lot of guys that were athletes in high school or college. I've been really surprised how frequently I've seen that. Have you experienced that as well?
Like guys who are athletes that understand Bitcoin is kind of what you're
Yeah,
asking.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, there's a lot of guys who don't. I mean, it's like anything else, right? Like
sure.
most people that you come in contact with have no clue what Bitcoin is. They don't even understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto yet, right? And so, but if you can kind of talk to guys, one of the things that I've noticed at least is you work really hard at basketball from a young age. And so like you kind of start your career a lot younger, than other people do. And so it's interesting, right? Like you'll see a guy who's 19 years old who gets drafted to the NBA, and he'll be there crying and saying, "I worked my whole life for this," right? And it's like, dude, you're 19 years old. What do you mean you worked your whole life? Like, yeah, I guess you worked your whole life for this, but you're 19. But his career is going to end when he's like 35, right?
Yeah.
Or could end a little, give or take a few years. So that's the difference is, most guys, when they're 35, that's when their career is just getting started, like when they're finally hitting their earning, like their
Yeah.
highest earning potentials. That's when they're hitting, like when they're just starting to go.
Yeah.
And so I think the difference for athletes is we make our money, like what we're trying to work at every single day. You make the money in a lot shorter window frame, and so that window it closes on you a lot quicker. And if you're not paying attention, then you're going to end up like a lot of guys that came before us that made their money, spent it all, and now what are they doing, right? Like they don't even have any money, have nothing to show from all that time and years and
Mm.
stress in their body that they put in.
Yeah. I found it from a personal level very interesting. Like you chose the age 35 because you and I haven't had a chance to talk personally before, but in my background, I um, I was an engineer, and by the way, athletically, I was a gymnast. So
Mm-hmm.
I played basketball and baseball and the regular sports, but I was a gymnast. That was probably what I was best at. And the nice thing about being a male gymnast is there's no pro potential like that. That so there's no illusions about hey I'm
The
gonna
Olympics,
make it.
baby.
I'm not gonna make it big, right? But
Yeah.
not that I would have anyway. I wasn't that good. But I was an engineer, and I was at Gateway, the personal computer company, and became the chief technology officer, and took them through an IPO, and I did well financially, and I retired at 35. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I'm here today at 59, and I'm still going. And the reason I am is that when I retired at 35, I unretired 60 days later, and I realized that I was bored to death. I was wandering around aimlessly. I didn't know what to do. Um, and I realized that the goal is not to make a pile of money and then coast to the end.
And
That
then
there's
just
a,
chill. Yeah.
it doesn't work. And I think that's what I think one of the problems in athletics as an outsider really looking in is, people haven't prepared themselves for that
The
post
transition.
athletic career. And both, I mean, maybe even if they did the right things financially, mentally, are they ready for the next step and have a purpose in life at the next step?
Yeah, there's something called I can't remember. I think it's called the 16th second, right? And it's about this guy, and I don't know if it's a true story or not. It's just kind of I've heard it from a fellow athlete. And it's about this guy who, he set out a goal to be the valedictorian at his university, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he studies, he gives up all the parties, he gives up, all the girls, he gives up everything because he's studying and studying and making sure he's doing his work, he's doing his homework, he's doing all the writings and everything he needs to do. He does it his freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, and ends up becoming the valedictorian. He puts in all the hard work. Like he set out a goal, he did the work, he accomplished it, and he won, right? Like he became the valedictorian. And he's giving this talk, and he's feeling amazing. Um, and once he's done, right, for the next 15 seconds, he feels this euphoria of I did it, I accomplished my goal, everyone knows that I did it. But then on that 16th second, it's almost like well, okay, well, what now?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the scary moment of what do I do now?
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of athletes, sometimes we don't prepare ourselves for that, is are you ready for that transition at the 16th second of okay, you've accomplished your goals, you've set out what you thought you could do, you did it, but there's more to life than just basketball or whatever sport you play. Like basketball, it's what I do, it's not who I am. And I think that's what a lot of people get wrapped up in. And I know I joke around a lot and I say basketball is everything on Twitter. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of a joke that
Yeah.
that I like to do. But in reality, there is that 16th second that you have to think about. And I've had two thoughts about retirement for a while now. Is one is we're like this life isn't just to work, 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 work. And then one day we retire at 70 and then we die at 65 or 75, like
Yep.
5 years later, or we just work our whole lives and then we just die. Like there's got to be more to life. That's one thought. And then the other thought I have is you can't ever really retire because just like your feelings is there, you do have to be doing something productive or else you just get bored, what are you doing if you're just sitting on a beach all day every day for your whole life? Like yeah, maybe that for some people that could be living the life, but I think for most people they would get bored doing that. So
Yeah.
you know you got to be ready for that 16th second. There should be some type of transition, but your life can't just be all work, 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 work either. There's got to be some type of, if you've been able to make money, there has to be some type of, I don't know if balance is the right word,
Yeah.
but there has to be some type of life that you're living for more than just the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I think that's great advice, Sean. And I like the 16th second. I hadn't heard that before, but I lived it. And so I
Yeah.
understand it. And, because I think, whether it's basketball or in me in my career as an engineer, I reached about as high as you could possibly attain. And there's a lot of satisfaction. Like you said, I had kind of that Victorian feeling at age 35, and then there was an empty feeling. And
Yeah.
at the time my kids were all younger, and I had retired in the summertime, and it was in June. And the reason my thing lasted 60 days was I spent that summer really doing a lot of things with my kids. And at the end of the summer, they went back to school. And that was really the realization when
Yeah.
they went back to school, like, okay, now what do I do? You mentioned like the two paths, and I can say that I am 100% behind the second path, which is never retire. I don't like the word.
Yeah.
The word, if you look at the word retire, it really means to be put out of service. And I have a theory, maybe that's too strong of a word, a hypothesis, that the reason women live longer than men, I'm sure you all know that, right? Women have an average life expectancy longer than men,
Yeah.
is that they never lose purpose. So if I look, for instance, at my wife or my grandma or my mom, all the way till the end, my wife's still there too, but all the way to the end, like my grandma who lived into her 90s, she had a purpose in life, which was, her family. It was very, very involved in the family and playing that role. And I think men have a tendency, not that there aren't great grandpas and people like that, but I think they have a tendency more to fall into the playing golf, playing cards with the guys. I live here in South Florida. I see this all the time. Guys whose life centers around what's the tea time, when is the card room? Let's meet for drinks. That becomes that 65-year-old retirement. And at 68, there's a whole bunch of dead people because of the same thing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
sad.
It is, yeah, it is sad.
Yeah.
But but I agree. I think like there has to be something more to your life. There has to be some type of purpose, some type of mission that's driving you,
Yeah.
like why are you waking up in the morning? There has to be a why behind what you're doing. And the good thing for me is I was kind of going through that with basketball, right? Thinking, what am I going to do when I'm done playing basketball, right? Like I went to the software sales world. Actually stopped playing basketball for 2 years, then came back to playing basketball. And I think a lot of that was when I realized what Bitcoin was and how I could help in the adoption of Bitcoin. That really opened my eyes into, okay, I think I have a path forward. I think I have a mission forward that can help guide me. And the biggest guiding factor is, look, I was a kid who didn't know anything about money. I didn't know anything about Bitcoin. I didn't know anything at all about finances. And and then I realized like I am gonna end up broke one day because I don't know anything about money. Like, I can make the money, but I can't keep it. And so then I had to go figure out all of these things about money, which eventually led me to Bitcoin. And I think that's the way that I see it now is, okay, I'm sure there's tons of people out there who were feeling the exact same way that I was feeling, and they just don't know how to get to Bitcoin. They can't figure it out. So if I can help educate other people along this path and plant seeds, because in reality, you have to do the education yourself. You have to really put in the time yourself to understand this stuff. But if I can make available some of this knowledge and some of this education, then maybe that helps spark more minds, and it helps accelerate the adoption of Bitcoin, which I think, from living around the world, and I've lived in emerging countries and poorer countries, I understand the positive impact that Bitcoin can have on the world.
Where are some of the places that you played or have visited that left a mark on you?
I mean, Honduras was a place that I lived for 2 years, and that was the biggest eye opener for me because I saw firsthand, people living in, they have ten roofs. Their houses are made of cinder blocks. The floors are dirt, or maybe
Yep.
cement if you're lucky. No hot water, right? Some people don't even have electricity. So to me, it was just a big eye opener for like, look, I'm fortunate to I'm from California. I'm from Sacramento. And so to be from Sacramento, California, to be born there, I have to recognize that, I don't know why I was born in Sacramento and not born in Honduras. Like, I don't know why I was born there and not born in some other country. And, why I get to speak English as my first language, and why the whole world basically speaks English, and they have to learn it. And so there's a lot of advantages that I had where I was born, when I was born. And so if I can help pass those things along to other people, like the old saying, where much is given, much is required. And so I
Yep.
think it's partly my duty to help others out, and because that's what I would want, right? Like if I was in a worse off situation, I would hope that there would be people that were in a better situation that could help. And so, I don't come with millions of dollars, but I can come with education to help people out. And so it's more like the teach a man to fish than give a man a fish
Yeah.
philosophy.
Yeah. I was this last weekend here in Naples, Florida, where I live. There was a Bitcoin Day conference, and to close the conference, the last panel was me, Greg Foss, Larry Lepard, and Gary Leland. It was called the
Mhm.
Boomer panel. And so everybody there is literally from the boomer generation. And kind of to resonate with part of what you said there was one of the questions on the panel had to do with, why are you here? Because for most of us, we're at a stage of life, probably for all four of us, we're at a stage in life where if we didn't have to work, we probably don't have to.
Hmm.
And we could just be quiet people on the sidelines of Bitcoin, or we could be active. And part of my response to why is that I believe it's a calling at this point. So to kind of resonate with what you said, and I think, we played different roles. I think the four of us, and there's some other older people, certainly people like, Max Kaiser and Michael Saylor are very noteworthy in
Yeah.
the older group. But we have certain life experiences to bring. We've made all the mistakes, we've survived a whole bunch of things. Each of us was successful to some degree in a different career. And I think, that Bitcoin needs some of those voices, and we also have the credibility maybe, or at least can open a door into the older generations. I think it's hard for a guy like Jack Mallers is brilliant, but unfortunately, a lot of the older generation is going to turn off as soon as they see him. Think, well, this
Yeah.
person
Like
can't.
that's like when I try to tell my mom and dad about Bitcoin, I'm showing them videos of Sailor, of Greg
Yeah,
Foss. Like those are the types of videos, Max Kaiser on Tucker, right?
yeah,
Like
right.
those are the videos. And I'm thankful that there's people in my parents' generation that understand Bitcoin and that go out and explain it. Because if it was just people that look like me, then they probably it would be harder for them to understand it, honestly, because
Yeah,
they just it I know we say like don't trust verify, but there's something about hearing from someone who does have those years of experience, decades of experience,
yeah,
when you have your own decades of experience, that it just comes off differently, and it comes off in a better way,
yeah,
so needed.
yeah. You'd think at least it would make them question themselves, because a lot of them are somewhat closed. I run
Yeah.
into that all the time, but maybe when I get the chance, and I know Greg and Larry are pretty close friends, and if we meet a newbie and we just say, well, yeah, I'm heavily involved in Bitcoin, we'll often get a really, like
Yeah.
really, you are, why, and orange pilling on the spot is very rare,
Yeah,
but
it's tough.
it's probably rare everywhere. But you might just get them to say, hey, if you get a peak of interest, can I send you a book? Can I refer you to a video? Can I,
Mhm.
and sometimes, excuse me, sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't, and for the boomers that don't get it, I don't, I think they can change the vector of their family's future if they get it and jump in. When a person your age doesn't get it and doesn't jump in, um, I, that really worries me, frankly, because they're setting themselves behind. They have decades and decades of life left, and they're going to have kids, and those kids are going to have kids, and you think about the ramifications of that. I teach a lot at Florida Gulf Coast University as a guest speaker.
Well,
Usually with senior level students, I'll go in and we'll talk about monetary policy or um, uh, financial regulation, things like that. And they bring me in to talk about Bitcoin. One of the few universities I think in the country that would be open to something like that. But what I'm shocked by is, as typically 20 to 22-year olds, how little penetration and knowledge there is about Bitcoin. And of course, I'm doing my best to get there,
yeah.
but it's tough. And maybe you see that, you kind of refer to it even within the the community of athletes. That I'm guessing it's rare, but I guess that's a question.
Yeah, it is rare, and I think there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, first of all, you have to be like you have to kind of go down a sound money rabbit hole to understand what's going on. You have to understand math a little bit,
Yeah.
enough to understand, hey, if the interest rate is at 1% in 20, if it's at 1.5% on average in 2022, and it goes to 4% or 5% in 2023, what happens to the debt that we're paying on all or the interest that we're paying on all of our debt? Does it get multiplied by 4 times? Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. And how are we going to pay for that? Does GDP cover that? No, it doesn't cover that. Oh, so we have to print it, and then we have to keep printing, and it's a never-ending scheme of printing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's parts of that. I think another thing is crypto is easily conflated with Bitcoin. And
Sure.
I think that there's a thing that's going on, and I don't think that's by accident, right? I think that's part of this the symptom of the fiat disease, which fiat over time has become a mind disease to people. Everyone wants to get rich quick. Everybody wants to win the lottery. Everybody they want to gamble on some altcoin and win, and hit it big. Nobody wants to actually work and put in the time and grow something and build something. And I think that's the mind disease that we're seeing going on right now from crypto, is that people don't even care anymore. That, like, it's almost this nihilism of, it doesn't even matter if we found sound money. I just want to get rich quick. And that's what I see myself when I see a lot of people that build it, like the quote unquote build, and they start out as Bitcoiners, but then they go, hey, look, all the VC money is going, like, VC understands they can pump an altcoin so fast to the moon, dump, and then go to a different one and do this perpetually, because this is the mind disease. And so a lot of these new founders, they come in and then they start building, or they start investing and making services for the other altcoins that don't solve the underlying issue, which is central banking control and inflation of the money. And that's what we have with any crypto, with any fiat currency. And so I think it's this fiat mind disease, and it's hard to get rid of it. Like, how do you go your whole life of wanting to get rich, of wanting to escape the rat race, of wanting to make it, and then how do you turn that off and say, look, I'm just going to build on top of Bitcoin. I'm just going to do what's right for humanity, even if that means I make less money. Like, how do you turn that off? And it's not easy to turn that off. And I think that's why a lot of people don't understand Bitcoin right away. It takes time. And that's the whole thing. Like Max Kaiser always says, right? You don't change Bitcoin, but Bitcoin changes you. And that's when you realize, like, when you see people are Bitcoin only, then you realize, okay, they finally get it. They understand it, because now it's not about the quick gains. It's about making a money and making the world a better place with a money that's honest and true, and not just like, how am I going to get mine and screw everybody else? But no, it's like, I'm gonna figure a way to win, but then I'm gonna make sure that I can bring as many people along with me who are willing to do the work as well. And so it's a very hard mindset to get into, and it's easy to get out of that mindset too. When you see other people making quick money, it's easy to lose that. And so it's something that you constantly have to stay up on.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, it's really insightful. I think that it's almost impossible. It's very rare to find somebody who started in Bitcoin and stayed pure Bitcoin, or so that started in this world and was only Bitcoin. For me at least, and I think for most of the people I know, they dabbled in other things. I started in the Ethereum world in 2017.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
like, I
but
don't think there's anything wrong. Like, a lot of us started in 2017, and we were like, okay, well, let's just buy
yeah,
all these altcoins.
right,
And then after a year or two, then you're like, okay, I get it now. I understand
right.
what's going on.
Yeah. but you do have to take that journey. And, I can say I have a degree in economics in addition to my engineering degree, but, and then I studied outside of school. I studied Austrian economics starting in about 2002,
Oh,
but
you were
even took
ready.
me a
You were
while.
you were ready for Bitcoin.
I was ready for Bitcoin, yeah, as a technologist who designed computers for a living and a guy with an Austrian background. I like to say that technology and Austrian economics had a baby, and it was Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And
Plus engineering.
yeah, so that's partly why I say, like, I think I have a calling. There's a certain role I can play as an older guy with those backgrounds,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about it a little more. I think, but I think there's roles for people like you. There's people like Greg Foss and James Lavish coming from the financial world and the institutional world.
Yeah.
Depending, the purpose of the show is not religious. I try to keep it secular, but I will say that I do believe that Bitcoin is divinely inspired. We should not worship it. It's not I want to be very clear about that, but I believe it's divinely inspired. That,
I agree.
it just too many things came together in such a miraculous way. And I do realize it was, several decades of technology and thought coming together, but I still believe it was divinely inspired for one person or small group of people to come up with it. And I'm in the middle of an article I'm writing. I won't say too much about it, but it's called The Unholy Trinity is the name of the article. And it basically, the basics of the article, maybe I'll give you just a little bit of it and get your comment on it. The basics of the article is that the most powerful organizational structure of all time is the Holy Trinity, or the Trinity itself.
Mm-hmm.
And inside a Trinity, which most people would know as Father, Son, Holy Spirit, there are actually roles within that. So the Father plays what's called the authoritative role, and Christ plays the executor role, and the
Mm-hmm.
Holy Spirit plays what's called the presence role. And so that means basically somebody creates the plan in a Trinity, God, somebody executes the plan, Christ, and somebody acts as kind of the conscious and the voice of it within the community. That's the Holy Spirit. And if you look at the most successful organizations over time, what you'll find is the US government is structured around that same thing. We have the legislative branch, which acts in the authoritative role, the president, executive branch, which obviously acts as the executor, and we have the Supreme Court, which acts as the presence. And if you look at the mafia, for instance, you have the Don, who sets the plan, the underboss who executes the plan, and the consigliere who does this. And but this is all my theory, so you or anybody else can call bullshit on it. That's fine.
I like it.
But yeah, but I believe money has been created in such a way that it filled the modern money, where essentially the executor role is filled by banks, big money, shadow banks. The executive role is state money itself, is fiat money itself, and that academia and the media have acted as the Holy Spirit, enforcing it.
The unholy trinity.
The unholy trinity, right?
Uh-huh.
And but I believe they're morphing, and because they didn't see Bitcoin coming. So, and I believe, by the way, Bitcoin is formed in a trinity as well. Maybe not by plan, but by design, that we have the white paper that acts in the creator role, the authoritative role. We have the miners and the nodes, which act as the executors. They execute the plan. And we have the plebs, which provide the consciousness of Bitcoin. So we have a Bitcoin trinity that's very powerful. That the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, that you need all three acting kind of as one. And I think that the monetary trinity, the modern monetary trinity that is the fiat system as we know it is
MMT,
yeah.
modern
Well,
monetary trinity.
but that trinity that I talked about before,
Yeah.
that's going to morph. They didn't see it coming, and that I'll save the rest, I guess, for another time. But that,
Okay.
but because I don't want to get too far from people talking about you, which is why we're here. But crypto plays a role in that. Basically, crypto becomes the the executive role in that, and the banks are still there. It's still the same creator that crypto becomes the executor, and
The
that
CBDC.
CBDCs and Ethereum and Ripple and things like that become the executor, and that it's the anti-energy activists and the media now that take the role of consciousness by causing guilt, which that's the
It's
effect of
amazing.
consciousness is that they create guilt. So I believe when the most powerful things are at stake, two trinities will fight each other. And so we will have the Bitcoin Trinity fighting the revised monetary state Trinity, and they're going to go head to head. They are going head to head, but good guy always wins. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you look at where the logical ending is, it's going to be Bitcoin versus the central banks, right? And I
yeah,
think that is where it's headed. And whatever the central banks adopt to use as their tool of choice, that's what Bitcoin will go against, whether it's a central bank digital currency or whether they co-opt something like Ethereum, which would be ingenious. Honestly, if you were the central banks, the thing that you would want to do would be to take something like Ethereum or to take Ethereum itself and to co-opt it with all the taglines. It's more energy efficient,
yeah,
it's decentralized, it's crypto, all of these things, it's for the people, and boom, you've co-opted it into a CBDC, and then you pump your fiat into it to pump the price up higher. And so the price signals of the NGU tech, right? Number go up
yeah,
technology, then it throws your average person off because they don't realize, why is the price going up or not. They just see that the price is going up, but they don't understand why or what for, or what they're giving away by buying into something like that, which is their freedom. And I think that is what Bitcoin ultimately protects, is it's this money that not only does it give you freedom financially, but as far as I have the money to buy what I want. It gives you the freedom financially to transact however you want. That there's it's censorship resistant. You can, like, no one can stop you. There's no third party stopping me from sending or receiving Bitcoin. And so, yeah, do these people in power, do they continually want more control? The people have always wanted more control since the beginning of time, right? Like, that's how it's always been, is there's always
yeah,
been people who wanted to rent seek, who didn't want to work. And it's so ironic that, like, literally in the names of Bitcoin is proof of work, which is the people who do want to work and want their freedom. And then there's proof of stake, which is people who've taken out the work and they want to stake their claim and stake their riches and then profit off of that perpetually forever, instead of having to provide something of value to actually receive their money. And so it's just these things. Yeah, I agree. I think they're headed head to head. I think the analogy is very fitting of that unholy trinity, because I think that, like, when it all is said and done, like, this life is more than just money. I believe in Christ myself, and I think it's Christ that saves us. And I think that there's people out there who want to destroy us. And whether that's, conspiratorial or not, it's like whatever. There are people out there who would choose themselves over us 100 times out of 100, and because they can't see us, right? And I think that's like, even if they could see us, I think with the internet, it's just made scamming. Think about how many crypto scams exist, and think about before the internet ever existed, it was so much harder to scam people because it would have to be your neighbor that you're talking to every single day that you're going to scam out of his money. And then you have to face him every single day. But then when the internet existed and popped up, you could scam
Yeah.
someone halfway across the globe that you never see and you never feel their pain. And so it's just all of these things have gone up by 100 or 1,000x, these
Yeah.
types of scams. And I think it is divine timing that Bitcoin has come around at this time. I think it's the idea is ready. They're like, people are ready because the problems are getting bad enough. And I don't think Bitcoin would have gotten adopted if Bitcoin doesn't solve a problem of yours, then you don't adopt it. And I think that that's one of the things is you have to recognize that either Bitcoin is solving my problem right now, or it will solve a problem that is going to happen to me very soon. And that's why you adopt Bitcoin. And so I think that's what's hard for a lot of Americans to adopt Bitcoin is they don't see the problems of the monetary system yet.
Yeah.
And because they can transact with the dollar, and for the most part that's fine. And they go, okay, well, there's a little bit of inflation, so what? Well, if you look at Turkey back in 2016, they had like 9% inflation in 2016. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, it's the amount of inflation that they have is unbearable. And it happened in a matter of years. And I think that's what people don't understand is going from 2 to 10% inflation, that's 5x, right?
Yeah.
Well, going from 10 to 50 is also 5x inflation. And once you're at 50% inflation, prices are changing at the grocery store every single week, and there's no slowing that down.
Yeah. The way I view inflation is, we've gotten a little bit philosophical and maybe even religious here, but I think if we look at sin, it's an interesting thing. It's, to me, it's either sinful or evil or it's not. And so, like, there's no such thing as stealing just a little bit. There's no such thing as murdering somebody a little bit. There's no such thing as cheating on your wife a little bit. Like, you either did those things or you didn't. And so inflation is the same way. Even stealing 1% or 2% via inflation, to me, is morally wrong. And so, and could it lead to worse inflation? Yeah, it usually does. It usually doesn't end well, right? I mean, history says it's 100%, 100% record of ultimately a currency collapsing because of this.
Because of
So,
inflation, yeah.
but I think that's one of the things with our society, and as an older guy, I'm not saying I haven't done bad things in my life, but you realize, like, yeah, there's no a little bit of this. It's either a good thing or a bad thing. We were talking about the Holy Spirit. Well, that's your consciousness. Something is either good or bad, and you know what? You know it. Like, if you're crossing a line, when you've come to the line, and if you're crossing over the line, if you're honest with yourself, there are very few, if any, points in your life where you go, well, I didn't really realize I was doing something wrong until later, and I look back on it like that.
Yeah.
You may be in a judgment error, but in terms of an ethical, like, what's right and wrong,
Yeah. And I think what the good thing about Bitcoin is whether you believe in any God or not, whatever religion you're, it doesn't really matter, because money touches everything in your day-to-day life. And it's important, like it's important in the now, in this life, to make this life better. You need to have better money. And just like what you're saying, any inflation is incorrect, because as soon as we start to inflate the money supply, which that's where the word comes from, right? people think like, oh, deflation and inflation. A lot of times they get them reversed. Even Peter Zahan got it reversed. I think he was on Joe Rogan, and he was talking using the words of inflation and deflation. He was using them incorrectly. He was using them inversely. He didn't even understand what he was talking about.
Yeah.
But as you inflate the money supply, you increase the money supply, what always ends up happening without fail is that prices increase faster than wages. And so even if you increase the money supply one time, you've stolen from somebody somewhere in that population who uses that currency. And that's what a lot of people don't recognize is someone is getting stolen from, because it's never, hey, we have a million, our population is 1 million. We're going to increase the currency by 1 million units and give one to every single person. Okay, well then why would you increase or inflate the currency in the first place? Why would you not just keep it where it was? And that's the issue that's going on, is people don't understand that as the currency gets inflated, it never gets distributed proportionally amongst the population. What always happens without fail is that it gets distributed improportionately across the population, and someone gets stolen from. Who is it? No one knows, right? Like we don't know. We can't pinpoint exactly, but it normally ends up being the poor people who save in that currency, who don't have assets, who don't have stocks, who don't have homes. Those are the people who suffer because they save in the currency, and they lose because their wages don't increase at the same rate of inflation.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think the problem here in the Western world, whether that's here in the US or typically like in Western Europe or even a place like Japan, is um, inflation exists, but at least in the last couple decades, it's been largely managed in a small area. So even those that were on the short end of the stick, it takes them a while to feel it. It's more like a series of paper cuts instead of, an amputation of a limb.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at other areas of the world, like you said, the people in Turkey right now, if you happen to have lived in Lebanon over the last couple of years, if you live in Venezuela, obviously, you're getting limbs taken off. And so who's suffering actually is the people suffering feel it right away. But it's almost like, hey, the disease is so rampant that it's a terminal illness now. And so, you didn't do something about it when it was still treatable and curable, and
Yeah.
it's too late. And I think that's where we sit. And maybe one of the benefits of the last couple years here in the US is some knowledge that, people of working age feel inflation. I can say that as a boomer, I remember inflation. So in the 70s, we had stagflation in the 70s. And I remember the stress that it put on my parents. So I would have been like in my early to mid teens, let's say, when this was really going on. And so I knew how difficult it was for my parents. And, and even now I look back and I realize I still didn't even actually grasp it completely. My dad, who's 80 now, he was visiting me recently, and he used to work 3 jobs. And by the way, he was a white collar guy. So he was a white collar guy. I would say
Mm-hmm.
probably a middle management type person working as an accountant for a steel company, but he was still working evenings in a liquor store and on the weekends in a grocery store as a clerk. I mean, that's what he
Wow.
had to do. He had to make it in that time period. When my mom was working too as a paralegal, so typical middle class family. But that's what it
Mm-hmm.
had. They had to have essentially 4 jobs for 2 people raising 3 kids, and
Wow.
we weren't poor, we weren't rich, but we weren't poor. But that's what they had to do to make it. And mortgages with 13, 14% interest rate, things like that. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty tough. But there aren't a lot of people left that remember that, like, or that, especially that can feel that. If you weren't born before about 1965 or so, you probably don't remember that. And so this is probably the first experience for those next generations to feel this in the Western world. But in the rest of the world, I'll kind of come back to that a little bit, because I asked you about it, like you were in Honduras, and I think that's the beauty of being in those places, is you see the problems of money, well, a whole bunch of other problems too, but you see
Yeah.
the problems of money when you travel in those places. And that's one of the things when I speak, that's often what I'll, in the first 2 minutes, I'll say, please try to separate yourself from your position here in a first world country with, a government that, as much as I complain about it, is still relatively uncorrupt, and a banking system, as much as I hate it, that's still gonna respect your request for withdrawals if you make them. Like, you separate yourself from those kind of places.
Yeah, but even I mean, it's interesting to say like that our government's not corrupt, and if you listen to a guy like Gladstein, right? One of the things that Alex Gladstein talks about is, since since the IMF has been around, which the IMF, International Monetary Fund, one of their main jobs is to give loans to countries, emerging countries. And what's ended up happening is that they've basically given these shark loans to these countries, and it normally looks like, hey, they're doing a good job. They're giving money to these countries. They're going to build up their businesses. They're going to build up their economy. They're going to be able to pay off their loans, and then they're going to be able to escape from this. But what ends up happening is they get trapped in these loans, and instead of ever paying off the loans, they just keep getting restructured over and over again, to the point where there's now more money coming from these emerging countries or third world countries, whatever you want to call them. There's more money coming out of those countries in forms of debt payments to the first world countries than loans that are going to those countries now. And so it's all about the flow of money, and that's what a lot of people don't understand either, is these countries aren't just poor because, what are they dumber than us naturally? Are they more corrupt? No, they've been trapped in certain types of loans that are somewhat of shark loans. And I mean, if you're a leader of one of those countries and someone offers you billions of dollars, you're going to take it, and then you're probably going to spend it and not spend it on your infrastructure, your country. That's what's happened over the years. But going back to what we were talking about, I think like this is in the 70s and the 80s. Paul Volcker ended up raising the interest rate to what, 15, 16,
I think it
17%,
might have hit 18 even, but yeah.
18%. And Jerome Powell, there's no way that he could do that. And that's what we talked about at the beginning, was purely off mathematics. Paul Volcker wasn't sitting on $32 trillion of debt, which the debt that we have in the form of bonds, most of it being bonds, gets rolled over. 35% of those bonds get rolled over every 2 years. So every 2 years, there's, whether it's the 30-year, 20-year, 10-year, whatever it is, 35% of those are getting rolled over. And so that's what's going on right now, is we have so much debt, and it's the payment on the debt that is the huge burden when you start to raise rates. And that's like, this thing is, we have inflation that's increasing, but then we want to raise rates to lower the inflation, but we can't do it because then the interest payment becomes unpayable without having to print more money, which the printing of money causes inflation in the first place. So it's this never-ending cycle that we're
Yep.
stuck in. That's why they call it the debt spiral.
Yep. Yep. And, second order effect of that, I'll speak, in the boomer world here, because I'm around these boomers, is like, when you start seeing the interest rates go up, and you see the reaction of Wall Street, and you see equities decrease in value, which is what we've saw in the last year, right? That people freak out because
Yeah.
if you're done earning money, you know, your pile is all hope, right?
Yes.
I hope I make it to the finish line,
Yes.
and and um, but those people can exert a lot of pressure too. So in fact, we've seen the Fed change a little bit in maybe even saying what its objectives are. It used to be full employment or as close to full employment as possible, and price moderation. And now there's rhetoric, and I've seen statements that maybe market stability and things like that are also
Hmm.
formal edicts. They've always been informal edicts, but I mean that goes back to is this organization itself inherently evil? By evil, I'm not necessarily saying work of the devil, but is it really serving the people, or is it serving something else? And I go back to that Trinity thing I talked about. I would say the central banks and the government serve even a higher power. And if you look at I'm sure you've heard some of listening may have heard me talk about Creature from Jekyll Island and some
Hmm.
books like that before. Look at how the Fed was created, who the players were, how they were constructed. I'll save it for the article, but I have a whole piece in my article about that, and that the,
Well,
the
even just yeah, even just to think that we can have one central governing body that can control the money and the cost of money for the whole population is pretty insane.
yeah,
Two people doing business in Iowa in the middle of nowhere, why should they be affected by someone in Washington, D.C.? Like why do they have the control over those with what they deem business? And why are they the ones that decide that they get to print money? That doesn't
yeah,
make any, like, why should the money have to come from the government? How come there can't be somewhere else where the money comes from that isn't controlled by anyone? And those are all questions that we've obviously asked ourselves going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole or going down the sound money rabbit hole in Austrian economics. And that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that it separates the money from the state, and which is a good thing. The state shouldn't have control over over the money. We should have freedom of choice over what money that we want to use.
yeah. Well, I when I look at it, I think let's say you could pick the smartest 10 people in the world, whoever they are, and the best mathematicians, the best economists, and you tell them, okay, you're in control. Um, and even if you have access to all the data you want, like that group also has access to all the data I want, I have very little faith that they could figure out how to manage money supplies and interest rates to optimize the potential for all the people. I don't think it's possible. Um, I think that when you go to first principles, when you look at the great Austrian thinkers, they'll say, hey, an economy is a living, breathing thing, and you can't contain it. You can't expect to understand it. The first, second, third, fourth order effects of actions. It's too complex. So the
Yeah.
best thing to do is leave it alone and let it be whatever it is. And over time, the expectation would be it would somewhat self-stabilize. And there might be areas of the world that are doing better, or sectors of industry that are doing better at certain periods of time. But that's just the way it's supposed to be. I mean, we're not supposed to have zombie companies, right? Companies that are failing are supposed to fail. And
Mhm.
yes, it's unfortunate. Yes, people lose their job. Yes, a whole bunch of capital that got put in got lost. But that's the nature of risk. Like
It's creative destruction, right? Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
just
and that's okay.
yeah, it's part of capitalism
Yeah,
is creative destruction. It's good for the economy to have businesses that don't work. They should fail. But the issue is that the United States has now become a zombie country where we are our expenses are greater than our GDP. And then the question is, well, how long do you like are we at the point of no return? And how long can we kick the can down the road before the inevitable happens? Before a Weimar Republic type of event
yeah,
happens. That's the question that we're all trying to figure out. How long until that happens?
yeah. And I think most people would agree that to a certain degree, the only reason we've been able to even sustain ourselves with some level of stability in this position is because we are the global reserve currency and hold
Yeah.
the global reserve asset. And so, how long will the rest of the world tolerate our behavior? And, as a person who spends a lot of time overseas that's married to somebody who was born in another country, um, I can say I see evidence that patience is running thin. And, as a guy living in another country right now, I'd be interested in like your perspective of, how do you think in general others perceive America, the American monetary system? But for instance, here in Spain right now, what do your teammates say?
It's interesting because a lot of them don't pay attention to what's going on. They do feel right now prices are up in Europe and in Spain specifically the prices are up, and so to them they're like, man, these prices are high, but to them it hasn't hit this boiling point yet. It's almost like, the old saying of boiling a frog in water, right?
Yep.
It seems like that's what's going on, where people feel the heat in Europe and they feel it, but they're not jumping out of the water. They're not looking around to figure out why are prices going up. Um, and it's the same thing, right? In the United States, everyone wants to blame the rich. They want to blame, oh, it's the greedy corporations that are causing this. It's not the Federal Reserve that injected trillions of dollars into the economy in a year and a half or 2 years. And so I think that's what a lot of people that they can't find the true source of why the pain is there. And if it's not strong enough, then they're not going to really look yet. But then when it does get strong enough, it's too late to look. Like that's what people don't understand is, if you were in Weimar, Germany, and you had these whipsaws in price, eventually you should start figuring out, why is it doing that? Maybe I should get myself some gold back in those days. And if you wait till once your paper currency is toilet paper, at that point it's too late. Like you failed, and there's nothing that you own anymore. And so I think that's the hard part for people to understand is, I'd rather be safe than sorry. And it's not an unsafe investment or savings, which is Bitcoin. And I look at Bitcoin as savings more than I do as an investment, because to me, an investment would be something that produces cash flow, where Bitcoin doesn't produce cash flow. And I think that's what, like, a lot of these guys like Buffett and Dalio that they miss about Bitcoin is that it's not some stock that you value, or what are the revenues, earnings per share, all this other stuff. You don't look at it like a stock. This is sound money that we're looking at. And so, that's why to me it's savings, and savings are completely different than an investment. And so you should be looking for the best thing to save your money in when you're hitting some type of crazy inflation, because most people, inflation is going to move a lot faster than their wages are. So you're going to have to work just like you were saying, your parents had to pick up, your dad had to pick up 2 extra jobs to handle that inflation. It's going to get to a point where it doesn't matter how many jobs you pick up. The prices are going to move faster than you could move. And so you have to put your wealth in something that will be able to handle it. And luckily, like we have something like Bitcoin. And this is what gets me is people say, oh, Bitcoin's too volatile, right? Like, well, what is there's nothing that's too volatile. Like any investor, if you want to say it's too volatile, any investor knows that you just have to position size. And so if it's too volatile for your portfolio, then don't buy as much, right? But to say that I'm not going to have any Bitcoin is because it's too volatile is actually something that doesn't make sense. And if you buy a house, you can't look at a 4 hour chart of how much your house costs, but you can buy Bitcoin and look at the 1 second chart of Bitcoin of how it moves. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that volatility of what it's perceived volatility of Bitcoin. And in all reality, someone young like me, I want something volatile. And if you are younger, you should want something that moves quickly in price, because yeah, it's going to hurt when it goes down, but something that goes up fast inherently of itself, even if it only moved up, would be deemed volatile. And so I think that's what a lot of people don't understand either is, yeah, do I want something that's crazy volatile, that's always moving up and down? Maybe not, but I do want volatility. I just want volatility to the upside. And you never hear anyone complaining about Bitcoin's volatility to the upside when it's moving up. You only hear about it when it's going down.
Yeah, and I think you would know as you get deeper in the rabbit hole, you learn a couple things. And the first one is that Bitcoin didn't change, something else changed. So the price moved not because of Bitcoin, because it does its same thing every 10 minutes. So
Mhm.
it didn't really change. It's just as stable and secure and doing its job. And so it didn't change.
Yeah.
And number two, just to keep a simple example, if you have 21 Bitcoin, you own 1/1 millionth of all the Bitcoin there will ever be. And so whether the fiat price is 16,000 or 23 or 69,000, if you're saving, I think that's a very important point, and you're saving for some future point, whether that's when you're 50 or for your grandkids, you don't really care. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter that much. And you just keep stacking. Um, and I think, as you said, I think it's a great analogy about home values, because Bitcoin, at least one positive thing is if you watch like the business channels, whether it's Squawk Box or you watch Fox
Yeah.
Business or whatever, those sort of things. Bitcoin is a very prevalent part of it now. So it's risen to that level where it is a daily part of conversation. So that's a very positive thing. But the negative thing is it's being viewed in the same manner that Tesla stock is. And so
Mhm.
it's perceived volatility as a result of that. And so it's fiat people with fiat mindsets measuring Bitcoin in their world.
And this
And
is, yeah.
and there's a point, and everybody starts there. I mean, it would be naive to think that people start
Mhm.
there, but there's
Yeah.
a point at which you start separating yourselves a little bit. Now, I run mining companies, so there's also certain things. If you run a business in the Bitcoin world and the thing you produce is Bitcoin, which is what I do, then the fiat price matters because I still have costs.
You have expenses.
I have expenses that unfortunately I still have to pay in fiat. If I could pay them in Bitcoin and lock in my energy costs and my labor and some other things in Bitcoin, then I would, and it would allow me to run my business differently. But we have to straddle that um,
Yeah.
that that difficult world. So
Yeah.
let me switch gears a little bit, Sean. I became, excuse me, aware of you first from Meme Factory,
Hmm.
and which is I had the honor of being a guest there several months ago, which I enjoyed quite a bit because it's a very
Yeah.
unique uh, show and format, and it's a lot of fun. But maybe let people know, how what is it, and how did you get involved, and how did it get started, and a little of the Meme Factory story.
Yeah, I guess Meme Factory came around. There was a lot of us memeing just on Bitcoin Twitter in what 2019, 2020. And we were all kind of just doing our own fun memes. We all kind of knew each other a little bit. We'd follow each other. And then obviously eventually we came together as a group. And it was fun because we were going down this Bitcoin rabbit hole all at the same time. And we would get on Telegram and talk or different things and talk and became really good friends. And so it just ended up working out really well. That we
Did you know
created this.
anybody physically before then, or was it all
No,
virtual?
no, we didn't know. No one knew
Oh,
anyone in that group physically. So we all became friends through Twitter, through Bitcoin Twitter, and for our distaste of fiat economics of the altcoin world of all that stuff. So and then of our love of Bitcoin. So we would all just meme it, and a lot of our memes would come from we'd be listening to different podcasts or we'd be reading something, and then especially for me, you know, I would be thinking about something in Bitcoin or in money, and then I would listen to a podcast and then would touch it. And then I'm like, oh, this meme would be perfect for it, right? And so then I just started to make memes doing that. And then we ended up, we did the laser eye meme. That was our group. We did the laser eye meme. And that's why most people have laser eyes on
mhm.
their profile pictures now. And so that was a ton of fun. And we've just noticed, as you do memes, as you crack some jokes, it's fun to give information and education, but it's also fun to, to just kind of to relax a little bit during this time. We know that Bitcoin's going to win. It's just a matter of when, and but we want to do our part too and help educate. So another fun thing that we're doing is with the meme factory is we're doing the halving party because the Bitcoin halving is coming up in 2024. And so we're doing the halving party in El Salvador, and we have a location ready, and it's gonna be awesome. Like it's gonna be in March, and to me, the halving is this huge signal that a lot of us don't even think about within Bitcoin, because there's a lot of things that are interesting about the halving. I would say number one, if you don't understand what the halving is, then it's really hard to understand why Bitcoin's price moves up from cycle to cycle. You don't even realize that there are cycles in Bitcoin as far as the dollar price is concerned. And so the first thing that you have to learn about Bitcoin, or one of the first things, is that there is a halving. And even and looking at price from last cycle's high to this cycle's high and last cycle's low to this cycle's low. And if you can understand that, then that helps put a good framework around, oh, Bitcoin's price is going to continue to move up. Another thing that it signals is that no other altcoin pumps on they don't have other cycles that they pump off of. It's all off of Bitcoin. And so if you look at like any other altcoin that's lasted any longer than 4 years, which most don't, those altcoins always pump the same time Bitcoin pumps off Bitcoin's halving. So it's another signal that Bitcoin is the only thing. And then obviously the halving to me shows the scarcity of Bitcoin as well, because it shows us that, I think Adam Back, obviously it's an easy calculation, but every halving is 210,000 blocks in every epoch or epic, whatever you want to call it.
Epoch.
Yeah. And if you multiply that by 50, because there was 50 Bitcoin in the first Bitcoin, in the first block reward for that first epoch, there's 50 Bitcoin in that block reward. We multiply that by 50, but then you have to do that by the sum of 1 over 2 to the nth power, because that's the halving. Every 202,000 blocks, it gets cut in half. And so it shows the scarcity that there can only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. There actually, because of that equation, there actually can only be a little bit less than 21 million Bitcoin, because it's an asymptote that approaches 21 million and never actually touches 21 million, which is pretty insane to think about. And then I guess the last thing that, something that I think is just cool in general is the structure of it. Is so the first epoch was 50 Bitcoin and a block reward, like we mentioned. Well, after those first 4 years, after those first 210,000 blocks, 50% of the Bitcoin that will ever be mined had been mined. And then the block reward gets cut to 25 Bitcoin in the block reward. Well, in that epoch, 25% of the Bitcoin that will ever be mined was mined. And then it gets cut to 12 and a half. And the same thing, 12.5% of that Bitcoin and that epoch. And it continues to do the same thing. So it's this beautiful structure, how the halving, and it doesn't seem it's by chance. And it's really this amazing thing. And I think it's this signal that a lot of us as Bitcoiners are missing to explain, because a lot of people think that the halving, when they hear halving, they think of a stock split, just like what we were saying. You go on Squawk Box.
Yeah.
Most of those people probably don't even understand what the halving is, because they'll think stock split, right? That's what the world that they come from. And it's not. It's showing the scarcity. And so the reason why we're throwing the halving party is to get that education out, to be able to celebrate the bear market that we went through. We know a bull market's coming. We don't know what a world with, a block reward size of 3.125 Bitcoin looks like. And we won't know until that happens. And that's what's beautiful about it as well, is that it's this supply shock that no one knows. And obviously, as without mining, understanding mining plays a big role into the halving. The halving plays a big role into how miners act, and you also have to understand the difficulty adjustment. So there's a lot of different things that play into the halving. But I think with the meme factory, we are really excited to be able to throw this halving party and to celebrate something that's super important and that will be celebrated whether we throw a party or not. We just figured, hey, it's gonna happen. There's gonna be a halving party eventually. So why not just get started now and start building something that will be amazing for years to come?
Yeah, I obviously, as a miner, I'm very aware of the halving, and
Yes.
I have my own little model where I try to track the date of the halving. But I think you did a really good job of describing the halving in a way that people can understand, even if you're not a math person. And that's part of the beauty of, I think, the halving and the difficulty adjustment, which you both mentioned in your monologue there, were, those are at the heart and core of what Bitcoin is and what makes it work. Bitcoin is not Bitcoin without those two things. They are fundamental. And I think it's wonderful to celebrate that transition. It becomes, I think, symbolic of the essence of Bitcoin. And, that's why I celebrate. As a miner, it's not good, I guess, and in the first order effect, because obviously our rewards in Bitcoin get cut in half, and ultimately that's what I want to do. I'm in mining to stack Bitcoin.
Yes.
So there's a little less for me, and I have to compete for it, right? But it's almost it's almost like a graduation. That's kind of how I feel. Like, hey, we've entered the next cycle, like we've graduated to the next cycle. So you're holding the event in El Salvador, though. Maybe tell us a little bit about what you've got planned. I know it's a multi-day event, and a part of that I assume is we really still don't know exactly what date and time the halving will occur. So that
Yeah.
presents a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, historically, at least, from what I've seen, the halving gets predicted, oh, it's gonna, a year from now, it's gonna be end of April or early May, right? And then it ends up more hash comes onto the network because more miners are feeling the same way you are. Hey, we need to get more Bitcoin before the halving occurs. So normally a hash rate picks up and the halving gets closer, gets pushed up. So we're already picking a date. It's going to be in March, the middle of March, and we're just and whether the halving occurs on that date or not, our goal is to celebrate the halving. It's a celebration of the halving, not
Yeah.
necessarily on the halving, but it's going to be at this resort, right on the beach. We,
In El Zonte, I assume, right?
it's an hour from El Zonte,
Okay.
because it's resort's got over 500 rooms.
Oh, okay.
We want as many people to come down to celebrate, as many people from El Salvador to celebrate. It's a free country, right? You can come in, you don't have to get any type of COVID test or anything like that. You can come to the country, and be able to celebrate. It's all you can eat, all you can drink, drinks. It's going to be all inclusive. So that's one thing is a lot of times people go to the Bitcoin conference in Miami or wherever, they pay for their ticket and their hotel and their flights, and then they got to buy, these extravagant meals, or they take some Bitcoiners out for drinks. That's one thing about here is like, you don't got to worry about your food and your drinks and any of that stuff. So, and there will be some education. There will be some people talking. It won't be your normal conference. It won't be a conference where there's, three different stages, people talking all the time. There may be two or three or four speakers in one day, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And then the goal is to bring Bitcoiners together, to be able to meet other Bitcoiners, to be able to talk with other Bitcoiners, to be able to experience El Salvador, because a lot of people want to get to El Salvador
Yeah.
and haven't done it yet. And so I figure this is a good excuse to say, hey, you know what? If I'm ever going to go, why not go during the halving? And that's a great, and El Salvador, I think, is very good for everyone to experience. I was down there over the summer, looking for venues, and just scoured the whole coast and finally found this place. It's awesome. And but we definitely should experience El Salvador right now. I think is important because it'll be good. This is the first country that's doing this with Bitcoin, and I think for Bitcoin to win, El Salvador has to win. I think that's important for El Salvador to continue to win. And I think we can help by coming to El Salvador as well as Bitcoiners to help El Salvador win and to help Bitcoin win. And that makes, it's not this zero-sum game. I think it's this thing where we can all become winners on the Bitcoin standard. But it takes time, right? Like El Salvador is not going to go from, one of the poorest or dangerous countries in Latin America to the best in 1 year. It's going to take some time, and that's the good thing is they have made a bunch of changes, and when you go down there, there's no danger. You're very safe. Bukele's done a great job in taking away a lot of those people who were in the gangs and different things like that. So it's an amazing country, and I think we should visit, and that's why I wanted to plan it in El Salvador.
I think it's wonderful. I think you made an excellent choice. Lola and my wife Lola and I have made 2 visits there.
Mhm.
And I can echo that we haven't had even the tiniest bit of concern about our safety at any
Yeah.
point in time. The access to transportation and communication and nice restaurants, nice hotels, all that is very, very good. It's not a classic third world situation. I've had a fortunate life and been able to travel all over the world. And what I've come to realize is you can feel very quickly when you get into a country whether or not it's on the rise or the fall, or at least it's stuck in the morass. And from the time we got to El Salvador, I had that feeling right away that things were on the upswing. Respect for traffic laws, as an example. My wife and I, when we've traveled internationally, it's one of the first things we kind of recognize. And her being from the Philippines, which I think is unfortunately still a country stuck, um, and falling over its feet. But as she'll say about the traffic laws there, say, there are no rules, there are only suggestions. And and I know it sounds funny, but if a country is that way, you'll find that in their traffic laws and the way people drive, then there's probably a whole bunch of other stuff that is all messed up too. But like when you go to El Salvador, I know this will sound funny, the people are driving the right direction, they're obeying the stop signs, they're obeying the traffic lights. The cars on the road are nice cars. So you just get this feeling like, yeah, things are things are going well. So just I'm really supporting that. If you're out there listening and you haven't made that trip to El Salvador, this is probably a great time to do it. And you'll be there with hundreds of other Bitcoiners too. And so even if
Yeah.
you do have a little bit of concern, I'm sure you can hook up with somebody, fly in on the same flight as somebody else that you have a relationship with, and get over your uneasiness. You'll get over your uneasiness very quickly. And your event is like a 3-day event, is that correct?
Yeah, it'll
It's
be
a 3-day event. But I would
yeah.
I would really recommend, spend at least a week. Um,
Yes.
Go to, I mean, go spend a day or two in San Salvador in the capital, and you can hike the volcanoes, and there's plenty to do and plenty to experience. Um, their English is pretty good. If you don't speak Spanish, you won't have trouble. Getting around. People will understand you, and they'll be, if even if they don't understand English, they'll do a good job of you'll figure out a way. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I would suggest the same, right? You want to make sure, like, don't just come to the having party, but yes, stick around for a week,
yeah,
right? You're coming to El Salvador,
yeah,
the having party will be that, you can get in on Wednesday night, stay at the hotel, and then we'll be having fun Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then you can head out on Sunday, so that's what it'll look like. And it'll just be a lot of events, a lot of food, good food, good drinks, and more importantly, just like when I go to a Bitcoin conference, I'm going to meet other Bitcoiners, and I think that's what we're going to be able to provide is
yeah,
being able to meet other Bitcoiners and share in this thing that we've been able to figure out, and then celebrate. Like, we've been able to make it through this. Let's keep enjoying for the next 4 years. Like, this is
yeah,
gonna be a fun ride, and the ride right after the halving is always, it's the most exciting ride right after the halving. So it's
yeah,
gonna be fun, and then we'll gear up for the next halving party in 2028, wherever that one will be. But we're focusing right now on
yeah.
this.
And I believe I was looking. I think there's a website available for people where they can learn about the halving, right? The halving
Yeah.
party.
Yeah, just go to bitcoinhalvingparty.com, and that'll take you to our Substack, and then just sign up there. It's a free sign up. We're just going to give you some more information. That way you don't miss out on the cheapest prices for the tickets and everything that we have. So yeah,
And have you
Bitcoin
opened that
halving
up yet? Have you set the prices yet?
We have not. We haven't set up. Prices are not on sale yet. We still have about, like a year, 2 months until we're gonna
Okay.
do the having party. So I think in the next 3 or 4 months, then tickets will start to go live.
Okay. So we'll put both the link to the YouTube channel for Meme Factory as well as the having party in the show notes. So if you're interested in either of those, I highly recommend both. Then we'll do that. I've got one more thing I want to do with you, Sean, before we let you go, just for a minute. So,
Yeah.
we play a game here. It's called. I'm going to share my screen with you. Give me one sec here. There we go. And we're here. We play a game here called Corrupt or Incompetent.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to play a version of it with you today. Do you see that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Corrupt or incompetent. So you we're gonna put a person up and a little quote or video clip from them, and then
Yep.
give you the chance to comment. So our first contestant today is Jamie Dimon, who on the heels of Davos said Bitcoin is a hyped up fraud, it's a pet rock. So I give you a chance to just talk about Jamie Dimon, his quote, and anything else that comes to mind here. Corrupt or incompetent.
Yeah, this is a quote from from in Davos when he was in Davos. I would say that Jamie Dimon is corrupt, not incompetent. He knows what he's saying. He knows exactly what he's doing. He said that that Bitcoin it was they're interested in the blockchain technology and not
Yeah.
Bitcoin. It's like, come on, dude. What is this, 2017? We're interested in the blockchain technology. What is blockchain? Like blockchain technology is nothing without Bitcoin. Why not just use SQL as a database, So I think it's funny. He said that Bitcoin's used for drugs back in the day, and then 2019, JP Morgan gets caught with like $1 billion of drugs on their ship, and they get fined. And so he's corrupt. He knows that he can make money off the altcoin space, and he hasn't figured out why he should be making money off of Bitcoin. So I would say he's corrupt.
Well, I would definitely agree with you. Mr. Diamond has made several appearances on Corrupt or Incompetent because every couple months he comes up with a new quote. But I would perceive, by the way, J.P. Morgan Chase and Jamie Dimon as, if you go back to the Trinity I talked about, they're kind of part of the top layer. They are the bankers. And so I also view, uh, we present a direct threat to the very infrastructure they're built on. So
Well, they
I'm
created, I mean, they helped create Ethereum. Like that was,
yeah.
JP
Yeah.
Morgan was part of that in creating.
Well, yeah, I mean the Fed itself, the meeting at Jekyll Island was held in JP Morgan's cottage on Jekyll Island. So
And don't forget all this competition that died in the Titanic a year before that.
yeah.
They were supposed to go on, right? So
Yeah. So, interesting stuff. So our next one is our friend Peter, who you mentioned earlier. So I'll just play a few seconds of this clip.
yeah.
Come on. I'm gonna try at least. Oh, great. Well, we're having oh, there it is.
Oh, here we go. I can't hear him.
Okay. Sorry. Well, here, we'll just go with this in the interest of time. Uh, but Peter on Joe Rogan's show, and the quote is, "It's all going to zero except for Bitcoin, which will probably go negative." So he's actually more optimistic about crypto than he is about Bitcoin.
I don't know if Peter Zahan is. I mean, I listened to this whole thing. I think it was like a week or two ago, and he was basically just the things that was saying. I think that he is what was it, inept? I think that he is inept. I don't think that he's
Incompetent,
incompetent. I
but
think
inept's
that
a good word too.
Yeah, I think that he may just be incompetent as when it comes to Bitcoin and sound money. I think he has a lot of good ideas on the geopolitical sphere, but I don't know why he doesn't understand Bitcoin. And I don't under I now, the more that I think about it, he does actually know quite a bit, and I don't know why he's against Bitcoin. I actually listened to him back in 2020. He was on Pomp's podcast, and I
Mhm.
listened to him, and Pomp asked him about Bitcoin back then, and he had nothing good to say about Bitcoin back then. So he hasn't changed his stance on Bitcoin. I don't know if it's just like he created a stance back in the day on Bitcoin and then just hasn't upgraded his vision, and he's digging his heels in now because he doesn't want to be wrong, which could possibly be true, or maybe and that's why he would be incompetent. Or maybe he's corrupt in some way that I don't even know about. Who knows?
Yeah. I think there's
He's
a
a spook somehow. Who knows? I don't
right.
know.
I think there's a lot of people. I mean, I think all of us probably to a certain degree, when you have to admit you're wrong, it doesn't matter what you're wrong about.
Yeah.
You have to suck something up, right? And that's hard. And whether it's this Peter or Peter Schiff or Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, or there's a whole group of them. It's highly unlikely, in my opinion, they'll ever admit they're wrong. They're just so deep into the
For years. I mean, Peter Schiff has had, I mean, he has to admit that he's wrong for years. I like I told some friends back in 2017 and 2018, oh, it's not Bitcoin, it's blocked. I was saying that to
yeah,
friends, right?
yeah,
Then I had to turn around and say, guys, I think I was wrong. I think it's not blockchain. I think it is Bitcoin, you know?
yeah, yeah,
And but it's good though, because now when they go, oh, all you do is talk about Bitcoin. Why don't you think any of these other coins? And I go, well, if you guys remember, I actually did say that it wasn't that Bitcoin was like the MySpace of crypto. And then I learned more, and then so it was actually good that I was wrong, that I didn't dig my feet in, that I changed. Well, I didn't just change. It was like I received new information. I evaluated that information that I received and that I was studying, and then I acted accordingly with that information that I received. And so, I don't think that it's necessarily like, oh yeah, I just flip-flop for no reason, but I had to upgrade my viewpoint. And I think it's good that my friends could see that at least, because I told them something that was completely
yeah,
wrong, and then I had to say, look, I was wrong. But now it works out because they go, oh, you say there's no second best, and you just think it's just Bitcoin. But then I'm like, you can't say I'm closed-minded because I used to say the opposite. And I
yeah.
think that's good.
I think it's pretty hard though. Go to Peter Schiff when you've been saying it's worthless since it was trading at $100, and you've been vehemently telling people not to do it, and they
Mhm.
missed what would likely have been the greatest wealth building opportunity of a lifetime. And you're a wealth advisor and a financial person to begin with. That's a pretty tough, humble pie to swallow. So
But what's crazy is that as Bitcoin continues to adopt, I like there's a real possibility that its biggest percentage movements, or some huge percentage movements, are coming up in the middle of this decade, like 2024, 2025. Like there is a chance for some massive movements in Bitcoin's price upwards
yeah,
if certain countries start to fall into Bitcoin, if other companies start to fall into Bitcoin, if we start
yeah,
to see inflation going through the roof as the Fed decides to, realize it has to pivot, and inflation, all of these things can align. And if there's companies out there where people buy Bitcoin and they realize that they have to self-custody it, think about, there was like what, $4 billion, I can't remember, there's like at least $1 billion of Bitcoin on FTX that was all paper Bitcoin. They had like one Bitcoin on their balance sheet when they're supposed to have over $1 billion worth of
yeah,
Bitcoin. So think about the price movements that can happen they're still, I don't think there's diminishing returns yet. And so I think that there's some huge price movements still to be had in Bitcoin. And if Peter Schiff would change his mind right now, he could still partake in it and still look like he was an early adopter. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, Peter, if you're listening, we will accept you. You know, just
He understands what's wrong with the monetary system. Like he
yeah,
understands that just fine. But he just,
yeah.
I don't know what he doesn't, he's
Well,
stuck in gold and doesn't get Bitcoin.
yeah. And it's I'm friends with Larry Lepard, and Larry lives in the gold world as well. And he always say it's a very small step from gold to Bitcoin, but
Mhm.
um there there's a lot of people who have spent a lot of years, some people my age who have spent decades as gold bugs, waiting for gold to return to its
To do
shining
what Bitcoin
glory.
has done. Yeah.
And I think to be usurped by something new is just it's a difficult pill to swallow. And I have found some of the most ardent resistance points from gold bugs, because I can get like the arguments about money and like
Hmm.
inflation and all these sort of things. Okay, they get that. Like we're in violent agreement about that. And then they can't see the flaw of gold. They
Yeah.
just can't see that Bitcoin is superior to it in virtually every characteristic. And they
Well,
just
I mean, gold has done a good job over the past 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years as being sound money. And I think that's what was good about gold was it showed people that there could be a sound money. And I think that was important, but it wasn't the sound money, which Bitcoin is. And gold is a step backwards, right? It's not internet native. How can I pay? How can I pay for if I want to buy something across the globe? How do I buy that with gold? You can't
yeah.
transport it across the globe, but you can with Bitcoin. And so I think that's what people miss
Yeah.
is gold is a step back. And then okay, well then we'll have a gold backed currency. Okay, well then we just end up right back where
Right
we
back where
are
we started,
in
right?
the fiat world. And that's the problem is gold always leads to fiat because you can't because it's not portable to the likes that we would want it to be portable. And it can't be transported over the internet and that's where it fails as money in an internet age. And I think that's where Bitcoin succeeds. Bitcoin is provably scarce and gold is not. And there's all sorts of things about why Bitcoin wins with characteristics as money. But that's what, people when they go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you have to go down the what is money rabbit hole, and you have to understand what are good characteristics of money. And we don't use money. Money doesn't become money just because everyone agrees on it. And I think that's one of the biggest fallacies out there is people think that we use money because we all agree on it. No, we use money because biologically we end up using the hardest money that is, and it's just subconscious that we gravitate towards that hardest money. And because it doesn't have any defects. And I think that's what people realize. Oh, like people couldn't even explain to you why we use gold as money. Oh, because it's shiny. It's like, no, we don't use gold as money because it's shiny. There's other reasons why. And gold has done its job. And I don't, and I, it's not good to hate on gold because it's done its job. But Bitcoin's here to take over and to really be that sound money for an internet native world, which we're ready for, and that's the good thing about Bitcoin is I think the world is ready for it now.
Well, I think that's an excellent ending point there, Sean. I think the world is ready for Bitcoin too, and I greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this. I know you have another important podcast to join with a meme factory announcement. So all the out there, uh, make sure that you've gone out and caught up with the meme factory folks to see about
Yeah.
their latest and greatest. We'll have all kinds of details about Sean and the Meme Factory and the Halving Party in the show notes. And I thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks.
A special thanks for Sean Harris for joining me all the way from Spain today. Sean's experience in the international world as an athlete, I think, gives him some very important perspective that pretty much everybody can learn from. It's important to always remember that money means different things to different people because they come from places where the soundness of the money, the soundness of the banking system can be very different. And Sean's experiences in places like Honduras give us that reminder. But maybe even more importantly, I think what Sean does is shows that really, regardless of the background that you're coming from, you can play a role in Bitcoin. And what Sean's doing with the Meme Factory and the Halving Party that he is helping put on are bringing the entertainment and celebratory perspective to Bitcoin. And I think that's sometimes something that we miss. We get caught up in the mission to fix money and fix the world. And sometimes stepping back and having fun and celebrating is a big piece of keeping our positive momentum going. So I appreciate everything that Sean does, and I wish him the best in what he does. And I hope you'll think about joining him in El Salvador for the Halving Party. I know Lola and I will be strongly considering that as well. Thank you for your time, and please remember that nothing in this podcast should be construed as tax, financial, or legal advice.